This is the Coast Business Radio podcast.
Tim Mander has been the Deputy Leader of the Opposition and Shadow Treasurer for the LNP in Queensland since 2017. He was elected as LNP member for Everton in 2012 and has held ministerial portfolios in government. Tim is a known local identity through his prior career as a leading NRL referee and his work in the community. Tim's political objectives aim to echo his refereeing skills, to win respect, not necessarily popularity. Tim Mander, welcome.
Thank you, Mike. Good to be with you.
Okay, the pressing issue, the restrictions with COVID, coronavirus. When are we likely to see further lifting of restrictions, and what is the LNP calling for?
Well, it's a really good question, Mike, and we want to congratulate Queenslanders for playing their part in making sure that our infection rates have remained as low as they have. So it would seem that we have basically got the virus under control. Of course, we want to get ahead of ourselves, but we think it's time now to start looking ahead and working out what restrictions we can lift. It's incredibly important that this health crisis doesn't turn into an economic crisis. And of course, there are already thousands of people who have lost their jobs and businesses who are closed. So it's really important that we have a blueprint working forward where the public and business in particular can start planning for our recovery. So we think one of the first things that needs to be done is that we need to have our schools reopened so that the kids can go back there, which releases a lot of parents at the moment who have a lot of time taken up in supervising their children at home. Some of them are working from home, and that's not good for productivity. So one of the things that we can do is open up those schools, get our kids back there, release parents back into the workforce, and of course then we'd look at a progressive rollout of lifting restrictions so we can get cafes and restaurants and small business back up and running as quickly as possible.
Because Queensland is a small business state, and you mentioned the cafes and the other small businesses, what can we expect then, say, in 12 months' time? Because it's not going to be easy.
No, it's not, and business won't be the same as it was in the past. And I think this is where we've got to give credit and give an opportunity to our small business people to be innovative and nimble with regards to responding to the crisis. So social distancing principles in some form or another would seem to be have to be implemented for some time yet. So that's why it's important that businesses get some type of warning of when they'll be able to operate again, so they can start preparing for that. Who knows how long this crisis will go for until we find a cure, which could still be 6 months, 9 months off. Business won't be the same as it was in the past, and they are going to have to do things differently. But I'm really confident that they will be able to adapt. But it's important that government works with them and communicates effectively. At the moment, what's happening is that we're basically waiting with bated breath on a weekly basis. What is the tally, if you like, for want of a better word, and where, what restrictions are going to be lifted. And I don't think that's good enough. I think the government needs to have a blueprint and to publish that so that people know what's going to happen over the ensuing months.
Queensland, Gold Coast, Sunshine Coast, up north, world famous for tourism. Tourism has been smashed, to say the least. Now with Virgin, the fallout with Virgin, what can be done to help, say, Queensland tourism, even Virgin, because we can't just have one airline. Otherwise, we'll be paying another $500 on a $500 trip, so $1,000. It's a lot of money. So what can be done? It's I see Jackie Trad was keen to dip into her back pocket for a couple of $100 million. It's not going to do much chop, is it?
Well, Mike, you're right with regards to tourism. It's one of the pillars of the Queensland economy. We're going to be impacted more than the other states with that, whether it's the Gold Coast right up through to Cairns and the Outback as well. So, and also recognising that, realistically, there probably won't be international travel for maybe another 12 months. So we've really got to focus on our domestic tourism industry and promoting within Australia, because they've got little options anyhow, about vacationing and holidaying at home in our own backyard. So again, we have to make that as easy as possible for businesses by cutting red tape. One of the unfortunate things at the moment is that we are the only state in the Commonwealth that hasn't offered direct grants to small businesses, which every other state has, between $10,000 and $17,500, and they really would appreciate that type of support. And the loans that the state government has offered to small business of up to $250,000 has already been oversubscribed. So those lifelines aren't there at the moment. And as you mentioned, when the government talks about giving $200 million towards an airline that is 90% foreign owned, that's got $7 billion worth of debt, that lost $350 million last year and laid off 750 staff in Brisbane, I mean, I think small business, particularly the tourist industry, would much rather that $200 million be directed towards Queensland-owned businesses to help them up and going. So we've got to have a government that is willing to cooperate and talk and work with the tourism industry. Of course, we've got to have a promotion campaign which promotes those places in Queensland that people need to visit. But we also need to stimulate the economy by investing in infrastructure that will have a flow-on effect right around the state, whether that's the new Bradfield scheme, whether it's opening up the Galilee Basin, whether it's building the dams that are required across the state. They're the type of things that we'll be committed to, which will have a big flow-on effect.
To do business, one of the big items is energy, the cost of energy. How do we address that elephant in the room? Because it really doesn't seem to be getting a whole lot cheaper. I mean, it's hard enough doing business as it is, but when you have the high energy prices, it just makes it ever so much harder. So what would the LNP do about that?
Well, Mike, we've announced already a couple of significant policies in that space. One of them is that we have two power companies in Queensland at the moment. The Productivity Commission and the Competition Authority have both said that they have, if you like, monopoly type of powers on the industry, and they need to be broken down. So one of our policies is to break that into three. That will increase competition, and the studies done by those two bodies I've just mentioned predict that would have a downward pressure due to the increased competition on electricity prices right across the state. But the other thing we've done, which is very significant, is that we have said that we will introduce competition in the electricity retail market in regional areas. So it's only us in the southeast corner that can get on the phone and shop around for the different energy retailers. I did that, and I saved $300 by actually just picking up the phone and making the phone call. That privilege doesn't apply to anybody outside of the southeast corner. So we are going to invest a considerable amount of money to make it viable for retailers to operate in the regional centres. And again, that will lead to hundreds of dollars of reduction for not just businesses, but for residents as well that live outside of the south. We think that they should have the same privileges in regional Queensland as we have in southeast Queensland. That's particularly important in a state that has the population dispersed as much as Queensland does.
If you win government in October, what are some of the priorities of the LNP?
Well, the biggest priorities, Mike, is that we really have to get Queensland working again. So we've announced some policies that will do that, but they take on even sort of a greater emphasis now, or even more relevant because of the crisis that we're going through. We need big, bold plans that don't look at just the next one or two election terms, but look at 40 or 50 years down the track. The new Bradfield scheme definitely falls in that category. So we have all this water every year that falls in the north. In fact, the amount of water that went over the Burdekin Falls Dam in February last year during those flooding rains could have filled Sydney Harbour in 5 hours. So for years, the people have been trying to work out what can we do with that water. There was the original Bradfield scheme, which had some holes in it. And we've had two of the Knights of Industry, Sir Leo Hilscher and Sir Frank Moore, been looking at this for some time, and they came to us and said it is possible to actually make this Bradfield scheme work if we make some changes. So we will be able to store this water so that we can produce enormous amounts of hydroelectricity to power up to 800,000 homes. We can also irrigate a landmass the size of Tasmania with the water that'll be provided. We'll create thousands of jobs, and we'll also help the Great Barrier Reef by stopping the soil flow into the Great Barrier Reef because of the flooding rains. So this is an exciting prospect that Deb Frecklington has already announced, and it will be one of our key infrastructure projects. I mentioned earlier the Queensland Dam Company to build some of the dams that are required across the state. We need to build a second M1 to stop that congestion between Gold Coast and Brisbane. We need to bring in this regional electricity competition that I also mentioned, and there'll be a number of other big-ticket items that we'll announce before the election so that people can see that we have a plan to recover from this economic and health crisis. Our concern at the moment is that this government, the Labor government, will not deliver a budget. And as far as I'm concerned, if you don't deliver a budget, it means you don't have a plan for the future.
A dam seems to be a bad word in the Socialist Republic of Victoria. They were asked there for the dam. I mean, that's Alan Jones's terminology, so he'll get the royalties for this one. But however, the minister, they asked the minister, said, look, why don't we build some dams? And the minister there, I don't know who it was, anyway, she said, it's not going to rain enough. So why would you build a dam if there's no rain? And anyway, and the Weather Bureau, they said, there's going to be no rain up until May. We've had rain after rain after rain, and as you said, just in 5 hours, it could have filled up Sydney Harbour. So what is the issue? I mean, I don't understand. What is the issue with dams?
I can tell you quite clearly, Mike, what the issue is. So the issue is that the radical green movement, I'm not talking about people that are genuinely concerned about the environment, which most people are, but the radical green movement have a philosophical opposition to dam building. They claim that the flooding or the stored waters destroy natural habitat and so on and so forth. But I mean, dams are a necessity for life. Water is a necessity for life, and one of the biggest issues we have in Queensland is water security. So the reason that Labor governments don't build dams is that they're concerned about the effect it has on green preference votes and green preference deals. So, if you speak to some of the right wing of the Labor Party, they understand the necessity for dams, but unfortunately the left wing of the Labor Party, which is the dominant faction in the state of Queensland and the state of Victoria, just will not go there with regards to building dams. It defies common sense. In fact, in this state at the moment, they are reducing the capacity of dams. The Paradise Dam in Bundaberg allegedly has some structural problems. In fact, it does have some structural problems. But this government is not listening to experts, which said all we need to do is spend about $25 million to strengthen that dam at Paradise, not reduce the capacity by 30%. Now, that has an enormous impact on people who have invested in growing, for example, in that region, macadamia nuts, knowing that they would have a supply of water into the future. Now, that supply is out. So it's that type of thing which makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. But the LNP is very much in favour of doing that, so much so that we will establish an authority whose only objective is to make sure these dams are built. And that's what we'll do.
And finally, I've got to ask you about the M1. Which will come first, the dam or M1? And it's when I first moved to Brisbane, and people said, "Oh, M1's terrible," and I actually got down one day very quickly in about 50 minutes. I thought, this is fantastic, talking rubbish. Anyway, that was my one and only time when I lived in Brisbane. Now, the other way around, it's the same thing. It's just chockers. Even with Jeff Kennett for the Com Games, when he landed in Brisbane and drove down to check out the games and stuff, and he said, it won't happen because you'll get stuck in this car park. So the thing is, when will the M1 have something happening to it? Do we build an M2? Do we widen the road? And the other thing, while we're at it, Tim, just quickly, why do governments build freeways too small? Because they know that with population growth, it's going to be bigger. I have no idea why. Oh, let's put 3 lanes. No, we'll put 3 in. And then within 10 years, you need 2 more lanes.
Look, well, to answer your last question first, is a lack of foresight. And one of the other issues, and this is the challenge that we have in this state, Mike, is that we have, before coronavirus, a debt heading towards $90 billion. So by far the largest debt out of all the states. So this is when it has an impact. So often people think, the debt's government debt, who cares about it? But one of the consequences of a debt that large is that it's then difficult to go and do the infrastructure projects that are necessary. So, but we've committed money already to the second M1. Some people call it the Coomera Connector, so that we can get off to 60,000 cars per day off that M1. It is diabolical, the M1, and it's an embarrassment for the major route between Brisbane and the next largest city in the state, the Gold Coast, and something has to be done about it. It also, you need to be able to cooperate. So that's a project that a state government would find very difficult to do by themselves. They need to partner with the federal government, and the Labor government here has a history of playing politics about these funding issues rather than trying to strike a deal. And I know that we would be able to work very well with the Morrison government. The Palaszczuk government hasn't got a great history in that. But to answer your question before, what will happen first? They can happen simultaneously.
Well, we hope so.
That's the type of investment that we need.
Because truly after Jeff Kennett, because Jeff's always very mild-mannered and doesn't say a whole lot much, he was shocked. I thought, having lived in Victoria, I thought, that's the Jeff Kennett we grew up to love. And
Mike, the other thing about that, it's not just those that are commuting between, the if you like, normal citizens or workers. It's businesses, small businesses, it's trucks. That impacts the economy. When there are these delays and bottlenecks and congestion. So, you will make the businesses far more efficient if they can move far more quickly and freely between those two major centres.
Tim Mander, do you think I would have got a red card? Is that what you call it with rugby? I mean, being an AFL.
Well, it's the word that's used for sending people off. It's a soccer term, but we just point the finger in rugby league, mate. So no, you've done well. You can stay on the field.
But would they have bought me a beer after it? That's the big question.
Yes, that's true. Who knows?
Tim, thank you very much.